James had never been a fan of staying at his aunt's house, but with his apartment undergoing renovations for the next month, he didn't have much choice. At least Aunt Martha had a spacious guest room, and more importantly, she was away on a cruise. His cousin Emma was supposed to be on a weekend trip with her friends, giving James the perfect opportunity to settle in without awkward family interactions. The house was quiet as he arrived Friday afternoon, dropping his bags in the guest room before exploring. It was a nice place, 2 stories with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. James checked the fridge, finding it well stocked with a note from his aunt, telling him to make himself at home. After a long drive, James decided a hot shower was exactly what he needed. He grabbed his toiletry bag and a fresh towel, heading to the bathroom at the end of the hall. The bathroom was larger than the one in his apartment, with a spacious walk-in shower that had glass doors instead of a curtain. James turned on the water, adjusting the temperature until steam began to fill the room. He stripped off his clothes, leaving them in a pile on the floor, and stepped into the shower. The hot water felt amazing against his skin, washing away the stress of the past week. He closed his eyes, letting the water run over his face and through his hair. He was so lost in the moment that he didn't hear the front door open. He didn't hear the voices or the footsteps coming up the stairs. In fact, James had no idea anyone else was in the house until the bathroom door suddenly swung open. "I just need to grab my... Oh my God!" a female voice shrieked. James' eyes flew open. Through the steamy glass door, he could make out 2 figures standing in the doorway. He immediately recognized his cousin Emma's blonde hair, and beside her stood another woman with chestnut brown hair, both of them staring at him with wide eyes. "James?" Emma gasped, quickly covering her eyes. "What are you doing here?" James grabbed for the towel hanging just outside the shower door, nearly slipping on the wet floor in his panic. "I'm staying here while my place is being renovated." Aunt Martha said it was fine. He managed to wrap the towel around his waist, his face burning with embarrassment. "Weren't you supposed to be away for the weekend?" The other woman had turned her back, but James could see her shoulders shaking with what might have been laughter. "Our trip got cancelled because of the weather," Emma explained, still covering her eyes. "I forgot you were coming today." "I'm so sorry," the other woman said, her voice trembling with suppressed laughter. "I'm Olivia, by the way. Nice to almost meet you." James wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "Can you both please get out so I can finish showering?" "Right, yes, sorry." Emma grabbed Olivia's arm and pulled her out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind them. James leaned against the shower wall, his heart pounding. He could hear the women's voices in the hallway, followed by a burst of laughter. Great, he thought, what a perfect way to start his day. He finished his shower quickly, making absolutely sure the bathroom door was locked. After drying off and getting dressed, James took a deep breath before stepping into the hallway. He could hear Emma and Olivia in the kitchen downstairs, talking in hushed voices that occasionally erupted into giggles. When he finally worked up the courage to go downstairs, both women were sitting at the kitchen island with cups of coffee. Emma looked up first, her lips twitching as she tried not to smile. "So," she said, "that was quite the welcome." Olivia looked up, meeting James's eyes for the first time. She was pretty, with bright green eyes and a small dimple in her right cheek when she smiled. "I promise we don't make a habit of barging in on people in the shower." James ran a hand through his still damp hair. "And I promise I don't make a habit of flashing my cousin and her friends." All 3 of them laughed, breaking some of the tension. But as Olivia's eyes lingered on him a moment longer than necessary, James felt a different kind of tension begin to form. One that had nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with the way her smile made his heart beat just a little faster. The next morning, James woke to the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen. He got dressed quickly, smoothing his hair in the mirror before heading downstairs. He had spent most of the previous evening hiding in his room, still mortified by the bathroom incident, but hunger finally drove him out. In the kitchen, Olivia stood at the stove flipping pancakes, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She wore shorts and an oversized t-shirt that hung off one shoulder. When she turned and saw James, her cheeks turned slightly pink. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. "I hope you like pancakes." "Love them," James replied, moving to the coffee pot. "Where's Emma?" "Still sleeping. She never wakes up before 10 on weekends. Olivia slid a perfect golden pancake onto a plate. I'm an early riser. Hope I didn't wake you. James poured himself coffee, trying not to stare at the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder. Not at all. I'm usually up early too. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, an awkward silence hanging between them as they began to eat. James searched for something to say that wasn't about their unfortunate first meeting. So he began cutting into his pancakes. How do you know Emma? Olivia seemed relieved at the normal conversation. College roommates. We've been friends for about 5 years now. She took a sip of her coffee. Emma's been letting me stay here for a few weeks while I figure some things out. The hesitation in her voice made James curious, but he didn't push. That's nice of her. Emma's always been generous. She mentioned you work in architecture? Olivia asked, changing the subject. James nodded. Just started at a new firm downtown. That's why my apartment's being renovated. The building had some structural issues they need to fix. That sounds more exciting than my boring office job, Olivia said with a laugh. I don't know, James replied, smiling over his coffee cup. Barging into bathrooms seems pretty exciting to me. Olivia nearly choked on her pancake, covering her mouth as she laughed. Are you ever going to let that go? Probably not, James admitted, enjoying the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. What are you two giggling about? Emma appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair sticking up in all directions. Your cousin has a weird sense of humor, Olivia said, pushing back from the table to get Emma a cup of coffee. Emma slumped into a chair, accepting the coffee gratefully. Just wait until you get to know him better. He used to put frogs in my bed when we were kids. That was one time, James protested, and only because you told everyone at school I wet the bed. Olivia looked between them, clearly entertained. I can see the family resemblance now. After breakfast, Emma announced she had to leave for a shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. You two try not to get into any trouble while I'm gone, she said with a wink that made James want to kick her under the table. Once Emma left, James offered to help Olivia with the dishes. They stood side by side at the sink, their arms occasionally brushing. Each accidental touch sent a small jolt through James's body. So he said, handing her a wet plate. What do you normally do around here when Emma's working? Olivia dried the plate carefully, usually read or watch movies. I've been trying to clear my head after my breakup. Breakup? James asked before he could stop himself. Olivia nodded, her expression turning more serious. 6 years together, and then one day he decides we're growing in different directions. Found out later he was growing in the direction of his coworker. That's rough, James said, genuinely sympathetic. His loss, though. Their eyes met, and something warm passed between them. Olivia looked away first, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Thanks. It's been 2 months, and Emma thought a change of scenery would help. Is it working? James asked softly. Olivia looked up at him again, a small smile playing on her lips. You know, I think it just might be. Later, as they sat in the living room with a movie playing that neither was really watching, James found himself stealing glances at Olivia. She caught him looking once and held his gaze instead of turning away. The air between them seemed to grow thicker, charged with something neither was ready to name. What? She finally asked, a smile in her voice. Nothing, James replied. I'm just glad Emma's trip got cancelled. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Emma worked long shifts at the hospital, leaving James and Olivia alone in the house for hours at a time. At first, they maintained a polite distance, but as the days passed, that distance gradually shrank. On Wednesday evening, James found Olivia sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket despite the mild weather. He paused at the door, watching her stare up at the stars, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the porch light. Mind if I join you? He asked. Olivia turned, smiling when she saw him. Please do. I was just thinking it's too nice a night to be alone. James sat beside her on the porch swing, careful to leave space between them. Couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts, she admitted, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Sometimes my mind won't shut up. I know that feeling, James said. Want to talk about it? Olivia was quiet for a moment, then opened her blanket like a wing. First, get in here. You're shivering. James hesitated only a second before sliding closer, letting her drape half the blanket over his shoulders, their sides pressed together, warm through the thin fabric of their clothes. "I was thinking about what comes next," she said softly. "After my breakup, everything I thought I knew about my future disappeared. 6 years is a long time to plan a life with someone." James nodded, acutely aware of her thigh against his. "What did you want that life to look like?" "The usual, I guess. Marriage, house, kids," Olivia sighed. "But now I'm wondering if I wanted those things because I really wanted them, or because I thought I was supposed to want them." "And what do you think now?" James asked. Olivia turned to look at him, their faces closer than they'd ever been. "I think I want to figure out what makes me happy first, before I try to make someone else happy." Her words hung in the air between them. James could smell her shampoo, something floral and subtle. He fought the urge to reach out and touch her hair. "What about you?" she asked. "Any heartbreaks in your past?" James laughed softly. "One serious relationship in college. We were too young, too different. She wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to put down roots. And now?" "Now I think maybe we were both right," he said. "There's value in exploring and value in building something lasting." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily from past relationships to childhood memories, from favorite books to embarrassing stories. The swing rocked gently as they spoke, their bodies gravitating closer until Olivia's head rested lightly on James's shoulder. Neither mentioned the growing attraction between them. It was there in the lingering glances, the casual touches that weren't really casual at all. But they circled around it, not yet ready to give it a name. It was after midnight when they finally went inside, both reluctant to end the evening. At the top of the stairs, they paused outside their respective bedroom doors. "Thanks for tonight," Olivia said softly. "It's been a long time since I just talked with someone like that." "We should do it again tomorrow," James suggested, his heart beating faster as she smiled up at him. "I'd like that," she replied. There was a moment, just a brief moment, when James thought about leaning down to kiss her. He saw something in her eyes that told him she might not pull away if he did. But the moment passed, and they both took a step back. "Good night, James," she whispered. "Good night, Olivia." The next day, Emma noticed something had changed between them. She caught James's eye across the breakfast table and raised an eyebrow, glancing meaningfully at Olivia. James shook his head slightly, warning her not to say anything. But later, when Olivia went upstairs to shower, Emma cornered him in the kitchen. "So," she said, grinning, "want to tell me what's going on with you and my best friend?" "Nothing's going on," James insisted, though he couldn't help smiling. "Right," Emma said skeptically. "That's why you two keep looking at each other when you think no one's watching." James busied himself washing dishes. "We're just getting to know each other. She's going through a rough time." Emma's expression softened. "I know. That's why I'm glad she has someone new to talk to." She punched his arm lightly. "Just be careful with her, okay? She's already had one man disappoint her this year." "I'm not going to disappoint her," James said quietly, realizing as he spoke that he meant it. Whatever was growing between him and Olivia, he wanted to nurture it, not rush it. Upstairs, the shower turned off. James found himself thinking about that first day, about the embarrassment that had brought them together. He smiled to himself, wondering what might have happened if Emma's trip hadn't been cancelled after all. A week into James's stay, dark clouds gathered over the city. The forecast called for heavy rain, but James and Olivia had already planned to visit a local farmer's market Emma had recommended. They decided to risk it, laughing off Emma's warnings as she left for her shift at the hospital. "We'll be fine," Olivia insisted, pulling on a light jacket. "It's just a little rain." The market was bustling despite the threatening sky. They wandered from stall to stall, sampling fresh cheeses and ripe berries. James bought Olivia a small bouquet of wildflowers, pretending not to notice how her cheeks flushed when their fingers brushed during the exchange. "These are beautiful," she said, bringing the flowers to her nose. "No one's bought me flowers in ages." "That's hard to believe," James replied, enjoying the way her eyes lit up. They were deep in conversation about their favorite hiking trails when the first fat raindrops began to fall. Within seconds, the sky opened up completely, sending market-goers scrambling for cover. "Run!" Olivia laughed, grabbing James's hand. They sprinted toward the car, but they were already soaked by the time they reached it. Rain pounded on the roof as they sat catching their breath, water dripping from their hair and clothes. "So much for just a little rain," James teased, pushing wet hair from his eyes. Olivia was still clutching her now drenched flowers, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She had never looked more beautiful to him. The drive home was filled with laughter and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. By the time they pulled into the driveway, the rain had become a full-blown storm, thunder rumbling overhead. "Ready to make a run for it?" James asked, eyeing the front door that seemed miles away. "Race you?" Olivia challenged, throwing open her door before James could respond. They dashed through the downpour, feet splashing through puddles, and burst into the house gasping and dripping on the entryway tiles. "I won," Olivia declared between breaths, water streaming from her clothes to form a puddle at her feet. "Only because you cheated," James countered, equally drenched. His white t-shirt clung to his chest, transparent from the rain. Olivia's eyes dropped to his chest for a moment before quickly looking away. "We should get changed before we catch cold." James nodded, suddenly aware of how Olivia's own clothes hugged her curves. "You can have the shower first," he offered, remembering their initial meeting with a smile. Actually, Olivia hesitated, glancing toward the stairs. "I was thinking of a hot bath instead. You can use the shower in the guest bathroom." They headed upstairs, leaving wet footprints on the steps. At the top, they paused, both needing to turn down the same hallway. "After you," James gestured. Olivia took a step, then slipped on the wet hardwood. James lunged forward, catching her around the waist before she could fall. The momentum brought her body flush against his, her hands landing on his chest to steady herself. Time seemed to stop. They stood frozen, faces inches apart, breath mingling between them. James could feel her heartbeat against his, rapid and strong. Water dripped from her hair onto his arms, but he barely noticed. Olivia's gaze dropped to his mouth, then back to his eyes. Her lips parted slightly, and James found himself leaning closer, drawn by something stronger than gravity. The front door slammed downstairs, followed by Emma's voice. "Hello, guys, my shift got cancelled because of the storm." Olivia stepped back quickly, her eyes wide. "We're upstairs," she called, her voice unsteady. "Just got caught in the rain." They separated, both moving to their respective bathrooms without another word. James closed the door behind him, leaning against it with his eyes closed, replaying what had just happened, or almost happened. Under the hot spray of the shower, he couldn't stop thinking about how right Olivia had felt in his arms, how close they'd come to crossing the line from friendship to something more. Had he misread the moment? The way she looked at him suggested otherwise. When he emerged from the bathroom in dry clothes, he could hear Emma and Olivia talking and laughing downstairs. He took a deep breath before joining them, uncertain what would happen next. In the kitchen, Emma was making hot chocolate, while Olivia sat at the counter, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing soft leggings and an oversized sweater. She looked up when James entered, their eyes meeting for a charged moment before Emma turned around. Just in time, Emma announced, oblivious to the tension. "I'm hearing all about your little adventure in the rain." As Emma handed out mugs of hot chocolate, James couldn't help wondering what might have happened if she hadn't come home early. The way Olivia's gaze kept finding his across the kitchen told him she was wondering the same thing. The almost kiss haunted James for the next 3 days. Every time he and Olivia were in the same room, he could feel the unresolved tension crackling between them. They'd gone back to careful politeness, both afraid to acknowledge what had nearly happened in that rain-soaked moment. Emma, sharp-eyed despite her busy schedule, had started giving them knowing looks. "You two are acting weird," she commented over dinner. "Did something happen while I was gone?" "Nothing happened," they answered simultaneously, then glanced at each other before quickly looking away. Emma rolled her eyes. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." That night, James couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, replaying the feeling of Olivia in his arms, wondering if he'd missed his chance. Around midnight he gave up and headed downstairs for a glass of water. The kitchen was dark except for the soft glow of the moon through the window. James was reaching for a glass when a movement startled him. Couldn't sleep either. Olivia's voice came from the darkness. She sat at the kitchen island, illuminated by moonlight, wearing pajama shorts and a thin tank top, Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and she cradled a mug between her hands. "You scared me," James said, his heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with surprise. "Sorry," she smiled. "Want some tea? It's chamomile. Supposedly helps with sleep." James nodded, getting a mug from the cabinet. As Olivia poured him tea from the pot, he noticed her hands trembling slightly. "We should talk about what happened," he said quietly, taking the seat beside her. "Or, what almost happened." Olivia stared into her mug. "What is there to say? We got caught in the rain, I slipped, you caught me, and then I almost kissed you," James finished. The words hung in the air between them. Olivia finally looked up, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "Would that have been so terrible?" she asked softly. James's breath caught. "No," he said. "It would have been anything but terrible." "Then why have we been avoiding each other?" "Because," James started, trying to organize his thoughts, "you're my cousin's best friend. You're staying here to heal from a breakup. I'm only here temporarily. It's complicated." Olivia set down her mug. "Life is complicated, James, but some things are actually very simple." She took a deep breath. "I like you, and I think you like me too." The directness of her statement caught him off guard. "I do," he admitted. "More than I probably should after only knowing you for a week and a half." "Time is weird that way," she said with a small smile. "Sometimes you know someone for years and never really connect. Other times it happens almost instantly," James finished. They sat in silence for a moment, the admission changing the air between them. James reached out tentatively, brushing his fingers against hers on the countertop. Olivia turned her hand over, allowing him to interlace their fingers. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. James considered the question. "Hurting you. Being a rebound. Messing up your friendship with Emma." "Emma's the one who told me I should talk to you," Olivia confessed. "She cornered me yesterday while you were on a work call. Said we were driving her crazy with all the longing stares and sexual tension." James laughed softly. "That sounds like Emma. She also said you're one of the good ones," Olivia continued, her thumb tracing patterns on his palm. "That I should give myself permission to feel something new." James felt warmth spreading through his chest. "And what do you think?" Olivia looked at him, her expression open and vulnerable. "I think I'm tired of being cautious. I think that moment in the hallway was the most alive I've felt in months." She squeezed his hand. "And I think I really wished Emma hadn't come home early." James moved his stool closer, until their knees touched. "We're alone now," he said quietly. Olivia's eyes dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes. "So we are." This time there was no hesitation. James leaned forward, one hand coming up to cup her cheek as his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, but when Olivia sighed against his mouth, something broke loose inside him. Her arms wrapped around his neck as the kiss deepened, years of experience melting away until they were like teenagers, discovering this feeling for the first time. James pulled her closer until she was nearly in his lap, his hands tangling in her hair. The next week passed in a blissful haze. James and Olivia no longer hid their feelings, much to Emma's delight. "Finally," she had exclaimed when she caught them holding hands at breakfast. "Now I can stop pretending I don't notice you two making eyes at each other." They fell into a comfortable routine, morning coffee together before Emma woke, stolen kisses in the kitchen, long talks on the porch swing that often ended with Olivia curled against James's chest. They were taking things slow physically, both aware of the newness of what they'd found and Olivia's recent heartbreak. On Friday afternoon, James returned from a meeting with his contractor to find Olivia sitting alone on the porch steps, her expression troubled. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her. "Everything okay?" She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just thinking." James took her hand, feeling the tension in her fingers. "Want to share those thoughts?" Olivia sighed, leaning against his shoulder. "Michael called today." The name hung in the air between them. James had heard enough about Olivia's ex to feel his stomach tighten. What did he want? To talk? To apologize? Her voice wavered slightly. "He said he made a mistake, that he misses me." James tried to keep his face neutral, though his heart raced with sudden anxiety. "And what did you say?" "That I needed time to think." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear. James swallowed hard, fighting the urge to pull away. No, it's fair. 6 years is a long time. I understand if you need to figure things out. Do you? Olivia asked quietly. No, he admitted after a moment. But I'm trying to. They sat in silence, the weight of Michael's call settling around them like a heavy fog. James wanted to tell her all the reasons she should forget her ex, wanted to remind her how Michael had hurt her, but he knew those weren't his decisions to make. He's coming here tomorrow, Olivia finally said. Just to talk, he says. James felt as if he'd been punched. Here? To Aunt Martha's house? I told him I'd meet him at the cafe downtown instead. I didn't want him coming here. She squeezed James's hand. This is our space. Yours and mine and Emma's. The hour gave James a flicker of hope, but it was quickly doused by fear. What if she saw Michael and all those years of history pulled her back in? What if this thing between them, still so new and fragile, couldn't compete with an established relationship? I'll support whatever you decide, James said, the words painful to speak but necessary. I just want you to be happy. Olivia turned to face him fully. You know what Emma told me the day before Michael called? She said she's never seen me smile as much as I have this past week with you. Emma's biased, James said with a weak smile. She's related to me. She's also my best friend who watched me cry for weeks after Michael left. Olivia touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. She knows me better than anyone. That evening, dinner was a quiet affair. Emma tried to keep conversation flowing, but the tension was palpable. After helping with dishes, James excused himself to his room, needing space to process his churning emotions. He was sitting on his bed, trying to focus on a book, when a soft knock came at his door. Come in, he called, expecting Emma with one of her pep talks. Instead, Olivia slipped into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. She wore simple pajama shorts and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. James set his book aside, his throat suddenly dry. I couldn't stop thinking about tomorrow, she said, moving to sit beside him on the bed. About what I'm going to say to Michael. James nodded, afraid to speak. And then I realized, she continued, taking his hand, that I'm only nervous because I'm worried about hurting him, not because I'm confused about what I want. James looked up, hope flickering to life in his chest. And what do you want? Olivia's answer came not in words but in action. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss more passionate than any they'd shared before. James responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Olivia whispered against his lips, I want this. I want you. What about Michael? James asked, needing to be sure. Michael is my past, she said firmly. You're my present. And maybe, if we're lucky, my future too. As they held each other in the quiet room, James felt the knot of anxiety in his chest finally begin to unravel. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight in this moment, they had chosen each other. And for now, that was enough. The cafe downtown was busy when Olivia arrived the next morning. She spotted Michael immediately, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees already waiting. He stood when he saw her, his familiar smile causing a strange flutter in her chest. Not longing, she realized, but the last echo of a feeling that had once been strong. You look good, he said as she sat across from him. Really good. Thanks, she replied, leaving her coffee untouched. You wanted to talk. Michael looked different somehow, less confident than she remembered. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began. About us, about what happened. I made a mistake, Liv. Olivia flinched slightly at the nickname. Only weeks ago, hearing those words would have been everything she wanted. Now they felt like they belonged to another life. The thing with Vanessa, Michael continued, it wasn't serious. I was confused, feeling trapped. But these past months without you showed me what really matters. And what's that? Olivia asked, keeping her voice steady. You. Us? He reached for her hand across the table, but she gently pulled away. We built something real over 6 years. That doesn't just disappear. Olivia took a deep breath. You're right, it doesn't disappear. But it can change. Michael's expression tightened. Change how? Into something different. Into memories, lessons. She met his eyes directly. Into the past. Because of him? Michael asked, his voice hardening. Emma mentioned you've been seeing someone. Her cousin, right? How long have you known him? Liv? 2 weeks. This isn't about James, Olivia said, though her heart warmed at the thought of him waiting for her at home. It's about us. About how sometimes people come into our lives for reasons we don't understand until later. What's that supposed to mean? It means that maybe you and I were meant to end, Michael, so we could both find something else. Back at the house, James paced the living room, checking his phone every few minutes. Emma watched him from the couch, amused despite her concern. You're going to wear a hole in Aunt Martha's carpet, she commented. How long does it take to tell someone it's over? James muttered. Emma sighed. It takes as long as it takes. 6 years is a lot to wrap up in a 5-minute conversation. James knew she was right, but that didn't ease the knot in his stomach. What if Olivia changed her mind? What if seeing Michael brought back all those old feelings? When they heard a car pull into the driveway, James froze. Emma peeked through the curtains. It's her, she confirmed, and she's alone. James moved to the front door, opening it just as Olivia reached the porch steps. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Well? James finally asked, his voice barely audible. In answer, Olivia climbed the steps and wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him deeply. James responded instantly, lifting her off her feet as relief flooded through him. I take it the talk went well? Emma called from inside. Olivia broke the kiss, smiling against James's lips. It's over. Really over this time. Later that evening, after Emma had gone out with friends, you two clearly need some privacy, she'd said with a wink. James and Olivia sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Was it hard? James asked, his arm around her shoulders. Saying goodbye to him? Olivia considered the question. Parts of it were. Not because I want him back, but because endings are always a little sad, even when they're right. James nodded, understanding. And are you sure this is right? Us? Olivia turned to face him, her expression serious. I told Michael something today that I haven't told you yet. I said that sometimes people come into our lives for reasons we don't understand until later. And what did you mean by that? I meant that maybe everything, my breakup, your apartment needing renovations, that embarrassing moment in the shower, maybe it was all leading us here. She touched his face gently, to this porch, to this moment, to each other. James smiled, turning to kiss her palm. That's a nice thought. It is, isn't it? She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. 3 weeks ago, I was heartbroken, thinking my life was over. Now I'm sitting here with you, feeling like it's just beginning. So what happens next? James asked, his thumb tracing circles on her shoulder. Well, Olivia said with a mischievous smile, your apartment renovations should be done in another week. They should, he agreed, wondering where she was going with this. And my lease on my old place is up at the end of the month. James felt his heart speed up as he understood what she was suggesting. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Olivia's smile widened. I'm saying maybe we could look at your newly renovated apartment together. See if it might fit 2 people instead of just 1. James pulled her closer, his eyes shining with happiness. I think that could be arranged. As the last light of day faded from the sky, they sealed their new beginning with a kiss, both marveling at how a single embarrassing moment in a bathroom could lead to something so unexpected and so perfect. Emma found them there hours later, still wrapped in each other's arms, planning a future neither had imagined possible just 3 short weeks ago.